The must-see thriller of 2025, The Black Phone, has finally released its long-awaited sequel. A terrified girl discovers that every time she falls asleep, she's hunted by a demon inside her dreams. Even worse, the injuries she suffers in the dream world somehow carry over into reality. Every night, Gwen finds herself trapped in a strange dream, where a boy attends a winter camp and ends up in a horrifying massacre. His body is brutally dismembered and later burned into ashes. Before dying, he traced a single letter beneath the frozen lake, as if trying to convey a message. Gwen jolts awake, only to hear a phone ringing sharply in her ears. But strangely, the sound isn't coming from her living room. Following the noise, she steps outside and finds a burned corpse lying at her doorstep. Drawn by the sound like she's under a spell, Gwen follows it until she reaches an abandoned house. She crawls into the basement where the ringing grows louder.
Hello? Who's this? My name is Gwen. Where are you calling from?
On the other end of the line, a girl tells her she dreamt of several boys being slaughtered, and they had left this phone number written on the ice. Gwen realizes she had the same dream, only in hers. The message contained 2 letters. Suddenly, static cuts through the line, and Gwen has to hang up.
Hey, Gwen.
Finn, noticing his sister sleepwalking, secretly follows her all the way there. To his shock, the abandoned house is the same one where he was once held captive by the grabber. Gwen stared at the phone on the wall that had been out of service for years, feeling like she was losing her mind. The name on the other end of the line is Hope, the same as their mother's, and even the voice sounds painfully familiar. But their mother had taken her own life 7 years ago. Seeing the bright, red blood beneath her feet, Gwen was certain this wasn't a dream. To uncover the truth, she visits the camp mentioned by Hope. Coincidentally, the camp is hiring new counselors, so she decides to take the job during winter break and investigate. At that moment, their father walked in and picked up the flyer from the table.
Your mother worked there.
When?
It was long before I met her.
Clearly, this is no coincidence. The next morning, Gwen and Finn pack their bags and leave, catching a ride with their friend Ernesto toward Colorado. The mountain roads are buried in snow, and it's already midnight by the time they finally arrive safely at the camp. The administrator quickly assigns them to their cabins, but the nightmare followed her everywhere, and Gwen dreamed of a third boy who also appeared beneath the frozen lake. Moments later, Gwen realizes she may not have actually woken up. A faint rustling came from under the bed, and she gathered her courage to look down. Another boy who had died tragically was now standing by the window. The two of them slowly moved toward Gwen, though neither seems to want to harm her. Meanwhile, Finn stepped outside for some air and suddenly noticed a lone phone booth ahead of him, its sharp ringing echoing through the night. After a moment's hesitation, he steps inside and answers the call, but the voice on the other end chills him to the bone. It's the grabber, the man who once kidnapped him, but he's supposed to be dead. Suddenly, Gwen's scream echoes through the night. Finn snaps out of his shock, races out of the phone booth, and manages to wake her up, but the dream felt too real. And now Gwen's arm bears a burn mark. Terrified to sleep alone, she spends the night in the boys' cabin. The next morning, the camp leader, Mando, gathers everyone together. He explains that Colorado has been hit by the worst blizzard in a century, forcing all other staff to evacuate. Now, only a handful of them remain in the camp. Then Mando's tone shifts. He notices that they never joined any church youth events and aren't from nearby towns, so why did they travel hundreds of miles just to work here? Gwen decides to tell the truth and shows him a photo of her mother. To her surprise, Mando immediately recognized Hope and realized that she was Hope's daughter, so he let go of his suspicion. He advises them to call home and let their family know they're safe. Down by the frozen lake, that same mysterious phone booth begins ringing again. Furious, Finn answered the call, but this time it was the voices of 3 boys begging him to help find their bodies. They don't even know where they were dumped. It's been too long. Finn wanted to keep asking who had killed them.
Find us, Finn! Please!
Late at night, Gwen woke up from her sleep in terror and saw her long-dead mother standing at the doorway. She quickly ran outside and saw, not far away, the boy who had been burned. When she tried to approach and ask what had happened, the boy suddenly turned and ran, as if leading her toward the truth. Soon, Gwen followed the boy's ghost all the way into the kitchen. Suddenly, the oven beside her burst into flames, and in the darkness, the one behind it all finally revealed his true form. It turned out that although the grabber had been killed by Finn, his soul was so evil and filled with hatred that he returned from the underworld to seek revenge on the siblings. A fierce struggle broke out between them. The loud commotion quickly drew the attention of the others at the camp. Seeing this, the grabber stopped hiding and showed his monstrous face. Just as Gwen was about to be thrown into the oven and burned like the boy before her, Ernesto rushed forward and grabbed her by the legs. Realizing he was outnumbered, the grabber had no choice but to flee. Later, in the church, Gwen described the three boys' appearances and the way they died. She believed that their spirits were haunting her because they wanted her to find their remains so they could finally rest in peace. Mando realized Gwen was telling the truth. The camp had once changed ownership at a low price because of 3 unsolved murders. The details Gwen mentioned matched exactly with what the previous owner had told him, facts that only police insiders could possibly know. Finn then shared his own theory. Even though the grabber was dead, his true identity was still a mystery. Their mother had guided them here for a reason, and perhaps the truth was hidden within this camp. Mando pulled out an old photo taken before Hope's death. Finn was horrified to realize that the man standing in the corner looked familiar. Fortunately, Mando still remembered the man's name.
Wild Bill Hickok.
Wild Bill Hickok. WBH.
That was when Gwen finally understood the meaning of the 3 letters written beneath the frozen lake. According to the Bible, demons feed on fear. Bill's spirit had returned because he had hidden the boys' bodies, trapping their souls between worlds and allowing him to draw endless power from their fear. To defeat Bill, they had to cut off his source of strength, and the key was finding the boys' remains. Gwen suspected Bill had hidden the bodies under the nearby Alpine Lake, a place buried in ice and snow where even the police refused to search. Mando said he had ice drilling equipment and suggested they set out the next day to find the bodies. That night, Mando stared thoughtfully at the 3 boys' photos. Suddenly, the radio beside him burst into a crackling noise, and the lights in the room went out in an instant. Grabbing a flashlight, he carefully scanned the room. Bill's warning didn't scare him. The next morning, everyone went to the frozen surface of Alpine Lake. Mando drove a snowplow to clear the ice, while the others searched for any sign of the bodies below. But even after sunset, they found nothing. They had no choice but to return to the camp and rest for the night. To prevent Gwen from sleepwalking again, Ernesto stayed by her side. But he didn't know that Gwen had already entered another world, where she saw her mother once again. But why had she gone to Bill's house in the middle of the night? Hope stepped into the basement and found a lifeless body lying there. Just as she tried to leave, Bill appeared and tied her up, throwing her into his van. Moments later, the demon emerged from the vehicle and invited Gwen to come along. Desperate to uncover her mother's death, Gwen got into the van without hesitation. It turned out that, just like Gwen, Hope had the ability to connect with spirits through dreams. One of the victims had reached out to her, guiding her to that house. Hope had discovered Bill's true identity, and naturally, he couldn't let her live. Bill explained that this world was not the same as reality. It was a dimension he created through hatred and evil energy, where any harm suffered would also appear in the real world. Gwen ran for her life, but since this was Bill's domain, there was nowhere to hide. She stumbled into a small tunnel, only to find the exit door locked tight. Bill swung his axe, cutting her arm, and in the real world, the same wound appeared on Gwen's body. At the last second, with the help of the boy's spirit, she narrowly avoided disaster. But in the next moment, the scene shifted, and Gwen found herself standing on the frozen lake again. It turned out that Mando, desperate to find the boy's remains as soon as possible, had gone there alone in the middle of the night. Sure enough, there was a skeleton beneath the ice. At this point, Gwen could no longer tell the difference between dream and reality. Suddenly, a sharp ringing sound echoed through the air, and out of nowhere, a lone phone booth appeared on the ice. As if under a spell, Gwen walked straight into it.
Mando.
Tell the boys they missed them.
Mando struggled to climb out of the freezing water, but Bill stomped his head down and held him beneath the surface. Furious, Gwen pounded on the glass of the phone booth, trying to break it, but it was useless. The next second, Bill smashed through the glass and wrapped the telephone cord tightly around Gwen's neck. In the real world, Finn and Ernesto did everything they could to wake her up. But inside the dream, Gwen sat still, deep in thought.
You didn't bring me here. I brought myself. I chose to come here. And I can leave when I want. See you later, Wild Bill.
Back in the real world, Gwen led the others straight to the lake. Although Mando was half frozen, fortunately, he was still alive. Late at night, a car drove into the camp. It was Terrence. Seeing the blizzard in Colorado growing stronger and worried about his children's safety, he came all the way to the camp. After hearing the truth, Terrence decided to join the fight. The next morning, they pulled the first body from the lake, which weakened Bill's power to some degree. But after searching the entire day, they still couldn't find the other two. As night fell, Gwen's strength finally gave out, and the moment she let her guard down, she drifted off to sleep. In the blink of an eye, she was back in the dream world, while the others tried desperately to wake her, but it was already too late. Not far away, a terrifying figure emerged. Bill, holding an axe, was charging straight toward Finn and the others. Deep underwater, Gwen finally found the location of the remaining two bodies. Bill reached the hole in the ice and began swinging his axe furiously, cutting the rope and sending the bodies sinking back into the lake. Then he turned his attention toward Finn. Seeing cracks forming on the ice, Terrence shouted a warning, but it was already too late. On the other side, Terrence endured the biting cold and jumped into the water. Their only chance of survival now was to pull all three boys' bodies to the surface and weaken Bill completely. Working together, father and daughter managed to haul up the first metal tank. Meanwhile, Finn, who was being pinned down by Bill, also sensed that Bill's power was beginning to weaken. Soon after, Gwen climbed back onto the shore. By now, Bill was consumed by rage and charged at her with full force. But in the very next second, all three boys' skeletons had been found, which meant that Bill had now become the prey. Gwen ripped off his mask and Finn rushed to his side. Standing face to face with the monstrous Bill, they no longer felt fear. Finn grabbed Bill's head and slammed it hard against the ice. The spirits of the three boys wrapped around him tightly, dragging Bill down into the frozen depths of the lake.